Anybody know the first two federally required automobile safety standards that were created? Anybody know what they were? Not seatbelts. Seatbelts didn't come around for a long time. Brakes. Now, see, I had an argument about this week. And I'm going to say no to brakes because brakes are required for the functioning of the vehicle. Same thing with headlights. You can't really use the vehicle without brakes. Some people do. I've noticed, but you shouldn't. Yeah, they weren't. No. This is cigarette lighters. This is kind of a trick question, kind of. They weren't required. Like seatbelts, I don't think they were required until maybe the early 90s. They weren't really required until the early 90s. And there's a lot of argument about this for people that I guess don't have enough time on their hands, or don't have enough stuff to do and too much time on their hands that argue about this kind of stuff. But you can get into things like on the car, but the trick question is that this was safety for the cars, but it was not on the car. And it was not required as in like you have to do this, but it was required like if you want our money, if you want federal money to do this, you have to do this. So you get things like seatbelts, airbags, laminated windshields. That's important. Like you don't want broken glass in your eyeballs. Laminated windshields are important for that. But the first two federally required safety standards for cars are center lines and shoulders. Nothing to do with the car, center lines and shoulders. The first one on the car is laminated glass. That comes around in the 1920s. That was the first one. But like safety was not really a concern. When they first started making cars, look, let's find a carriage and strap an engine to that thing and see how fast it'll go. And then they're later like, well, we almost died, so what can we do to not almost die again? But you get center lines and shoulders. Now, center lines are pretty obvious. They were having a lot of head-on collisions, right? Because people didn't know which side of the road was there, so they were just everywhere. Center lines, though, it started in Michigan. They would paint just a line down the middle of the road, and it saved a ton of lives. Strip of paint saved a ton of lives, because when you say, don't cross this line or you'll die, people live. It's crazy how that works out. But shoulders are actually a pretty radical innovation. I mean, you don't think of it as that big of a deal, but it's a radical innovation. But because it requires a different type of thinking. We don't generally think about things going wrong. We generally just respond to, well, this might happen, I'm going to die. We generally live in a world where everything's going to go perfectly unless I do this one thing. We don't live in a world where it's like, well, this may happen. Even if you look at how we design things now, we generally don't think about, well, what if something goes wrong? You look at cars, like how long did it take us to put seatbelts in cars? It took a long time for us to figure out flying through the windshield was a bad idea. A long time we were dealing with that. But the shoulders of roads require you to think, you know what? I might be driving down the road and need to stop because of something. Somebody might be driving down the road towards me and do something dumb and I need to swerve. Or I might get tired while I'm driving and have to go off the road, and all of a sudden I'm going bumpity bump while I'm driving down the road, and it wakes me up. Like shoulders require you to live in a world where things might go wrong and to plan for it. And we don't think that way. Teaching Cooper to drive. And like he's at an intersection. I don't know how more people don't die teaching their kids how to drive, right? And he does a great job, but we're at a four-way stop. We're at a stoplight. And he's got the right of way. He can go. So he goes. He's focused on where he's going. I'm like, oh, you're going to kill us. But he's like, what did I do wrong? Like, I'm turning right. I have the right of way. I'm looking where I'm going. What did I do wrong? Like, you're not doing anything wrong except assuming everybody around you is intelligent. That's what you're doing wrong. You're assuming everybody around you is going to make good decisions. You're not planning for things to go wrong. You're just assuming you live in a world where everything is going to go right. And that's what shoulders are all about. Shoulders are all about assuming that something will go wrong and planning for it. I'm going to go to sleep, I'm going to go off the road, and I need a place that I can recover. I'm going to have a flat, and I need a place that I can recover. Somebody else is going to come into my lane, and I need a place that I can go other than a ditch or a tree. Shoulders are they seem stupid, they seem like nothing. They're a radical innovation in automobile safety that nobody gives anybody any credit for. But they saved almost as many lives as the center line did, right off the bat. And there's a really, really obvious, easy spiritual correlation here. Like, so obvious, like I almost don't even need to preach it. I can just lay it out there for you and I can go home. But then most of y'all would get upset if I didn't preach the whole sermon. But we got it here, right? The center line is what we talk about all the line. The center line is, here's the line between righteousness and sin. And if you cross that line, you die, right? This is what happens. You cross the center line while you're driving, you die. You're going to hit something head on, you're going to die. Don't cross the center line or you die. This is what we talk about all the time. This is righteousness. This is sin. Don't sin. If you sin, get over as quick as you can. Get back. And we talk about the ditches all the time too. It's the same as the center line. The ditch is not a place you want to drive, right? There are trees there. There are culverts there. There's stuff you don't want to do. This is not a place you are meant to drive. And if you drive there very long, you are going to wreck your car. But the thing we don't talk about very often is the shoulder. The shoulder is a place that you can build into your life that gives you some room to make some mistakes without getting into dangerous territory. The shoulder are attitudes, behaviors, and habits that are not sinful. They're not like super righteous behavior, but they're just things that give you some room between you and danger. Let me just put it this way. Let's say God asks you to do something you don't want to do. And you swerve because you don't want to do that thing. Where do you go when you swerve? Well, most of the time what happens is you just disobey because you don't want to do that thing. And you swerve right off the road into a tree. But shoulders, building shoulders into your life, are attitudes, behaviors, and habits that allow you to swerve onto the shoulder. It allows you to react to God telling you to do something you don't want to do, but keeps you from going into direct disobedience. You react, but you've still got these things in place that allow you to continue on the bumpity bumps without going straight into a tree. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. It's not just, hey, do this, don't do this. But let's build these things into our lives that give us some margin so that when God calls you to do something that's difficult for you to do, your options are not just obey or disobey, but you can react to it and still be in obedience. You don't have so little margin in your life that you just swerve into oncoming traffic or you swerve into a tree. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. Now, as we talk about this first one, we're going to talk about the one that's most important. We're going to talk about the one that Jesus said is the strongest indicator of who you are and who you're following in your life. We're going to talk about the one that most people deal with at the beginning of January. We're going to talk about money. And I'm not talking to you about tithing. I'm not talking to you about giving. I'm not talking about any of those things because we're going to talk about that another time. But today, I just want to talk to you about your attitude towards your money and towards God and how you can build a shoulder into your life to make sure that whenever God calls you to do something with your money, your options are not just disobey through reaction, disobey because you don't want to do what he calls you to do, or be perfect in your obedience. But instead, you can build some things into your life that allow you to react to the difficult thing he asked you to do without swerving into a tree. Now, we're going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 15. We're going to be going through these, and I just want to talk to you about this because what God does in Deuteronomy chapter 15 is he tells the people of Israel what he cares about, how they're going to react to it, and what they can do to prepare for what he's going to ask them to do based on what he wants them done. He really just lays this out really simply. This is what I care about and what I'm going to ask you to do. This is how you're going to react to it, which is not well. And this is what you need to do to prepare yourself, what you need to do to build a shoulder into your life so that when I ask you to do something that's difficult for you to do, you don't immediately swerve into a tree over this, okay? Some easy things to talk about. Deuteronomy chapter 15, starting in verse 7. Now, before we jump into this, let me just tell you some things. The Bible is divided into two parts. Most of you know this already, but if you don't know this, let me just help you understand this. The Bible is divided into two parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is everything before Jesus, well, really before John the Baptist, and the New Testament is everything John the Baptist on. That's what happens. The Old Testament is really centered on the first 5 books called the Torah or Pentateuch, and that's the law that was given to Israel. That's where you get the 10 Commandments, that's where you get some of the laws that people complain about, things like not sowing 2 kinds of seed in your field, or not eating certain kind of foods, or some of the things about stoning people to death over different things, and people get up in arms about. If you look at people complaining about the Bible on the internet, this is the stuff they're going to complain about most of the time, okay? We are not required to obey these laws. We're not required, because of what Jesus did, we're not required to obey these laws. These laws were given to them so that they would see that they are not able to keep God's rules. And so they would see that there was need for somebody else to come and be perfect on their behalf. Built into these laws were sacrifices. Sacrifices that they would have to offer constantly, because they needed to understand that they would not keep the law, they would not be perfect, and they needed someone else to be perfect on their behalf. And what Jesus did is he came and fulfilled the law. He kept the entire law in a way that no one ever had, and then he offered himself up as the perfect sacrifice, the final sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice that fulfilled the entire law. And he changed it. No longer are you required to keep the law to be made right with God, which no one ever did except for Jesus. But now you trust Jesus to be the perfect and ultimate sacrifice for you. If anyone recognizes that they are a sinner, that they cannot do this, that Jesus is the only Son of God, and that he is the only one that can do this for them, and they cry out to him and say, I can't do this, I need you to do this for me, and you're the only one that can, and they trust in him to do that, then they are saved. Not because they keep the law, but because Jesus has kept the law and they trust in him to make them right. So as I read to you things from the law, as I read to you from things that the Jews were under, I want you to understand that this is stuff that we're not required to keep, but things that Jesus has kept for us. But there's still useful things here for us. Now, there's 3 different kinds of laws that are given. There's the ritual law. That is, hey, you got to always have tassels on your clothes so everybody knows you're a Jew. And you can't eat these kinds of foods. We're not required to keep any of those. The whole point of those laws was to show that they were a different kind of people. It was to let everybody around them know that they were followers of Yahweh. They were separate kind of people. We're not required to follow any of those. If you don't want to eat certain kinds of foods, you do you. But that's not what we're supposed to do. We're not required to follow any of those. There's civil laws. Don't murder people. Don't steal stuff. Those are all good laws. And most of the laws of our country are based on those civil laws. But then there's the third kind of laws, and that's the moral laws. And we're not required to obey those laws in the same way. But those laws are really important because they tell us what God cares about. And that's one of these laws. That's what we're talking about today. So that's a long intro to tell you this. You're not required to obey the laws given to the Jews for your salvation. But you should care about what God cares about. And this passage that we're about to read is not a law as in you follow this or God is not going to let you into heaven. But if you have been saved by Jesus, you should care about what God cares about. And this is one of those passages where he tells you what he cares about. So if you don't follow this, this is not if you don't follow this, you go to hell kind of law. But if you're saved by Jesus and you're unwilling to follow this, you have some strong things that you need to consider about yourself and who you are and what you care about, that you don't care about the heart of God when it comes to what he cares about. And that's what we're talking about. So let's read through this, but let's read through it with that in mind. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 15, starting in verse 7. My computer went to sleep again. If among you one of your brothers should become poor, if in any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. So this is what God says. When you're in your home, your town, your village, your land, wherever you live, and somebody there needs something, you have it, you help them. Pretty simple. Somebody's in need, you can help them, you help them. There are no qualifications here about, well, they got themselves into this mess, so they got them into it. They made poor choices over and over and over again, so you don't help them. It's just, God says, I care about poor people. I want you to care about poor people. That's the end of the conversation. And in this, what we get right off the bat is we learn some things that God thinks. We learn the way that God approaches this. We learn what God thinks about things. And the first thing that we learn is that God cares about people who are poor. God cares about people who are in need. And he thinks you should too. He thinks I should too. God cares about people who are in need, and he thinks we should too. One of the things that God did when he brought the people of Israel in the land is he gave every family that was there a plot of land so that no one would be poor. He said, I don't want any family to be poor. He said, I'm not going to allow you to sell your land permanently so that every family will have land here. If you do sell your land, you're only allowed to sell it for a certain period of time before it reverts back to you so that your stupid decisions don't affect your grandchildren too much. But they will always have that land. But he knew that what would happen is that as much as he tried, people were going to make decisions that led them into poverty. People were going to make decisions that led them into these things. Circumstances were going to happen. There were going to be famines. There were going to be droughts. Things would happen and people would be poor. And he says, as much as I try to set people up to succeed, they will find a way to not succeed. So when that happens and you see somebody in need, your response should be to help them. And our response is generally, well, I would, but that help's not going to do any good, right? Because they just made those decisions to get themselves in that position, so they're going to keep making those decisions, so I'm not going to help. But God didn't leave any caveats here, right? He didn't say, if they made good decisions most of the time, they're just on hard times, then you help them. But if they made decisions a bunch of bad times, they're alcoholics, they just waste all their money, then you don't have to help them. He didn't leave any caveats there. He just said, when you see people in need, help them. Does that mean we don't use any wisdom when it comes to helping people? No. There's instructions all throughout the Bible about wisdom when it comes to helping people, wisdom when it comes to money, wisdom when it comes to things. We have rules about how we help people in this church. The Benevolence Committee has strict instructions about how they help people in this church. The first time that somebody comes in need, if they think it's a legitimate need, they're just supposed to help them. The second time they come to ask for help, they're supposed to say, we're willing to help you, but we need to see that you have taken these steps. And we need to see that you're willing to do these things. And we want to help you, but we want to do it in a wise way. And if those people are willing to be helped in a wise way, then we're willing to do that. But what wisdom does is not decide whether or not you help somebody. Wisdom decides how you help somebody. And God doesn't leave room for you to decide whether or not you're going to help somebody in need. God says, help them. Your lead response is compassion, because that's my response to you. Imagine if God responded to your need the same way that we generally respond to somebody else's need. Well, they're coming back for forgiveness again. And I've got plenty of forgiveness to offer, but this is like the 5th time they've asked for forgiveness this week. And they keep making the same decisions over and over, and it's like they're addicted to sin. If they would just show some kind of effort to deal with this, if they would just show that they're interested in fixing this problem, then maybe I would help. But I feel like I'm just throwing good money after bad here, right? Is that how God responds to your need? Because it's not how he responds to my need. And what God says here is when people around you are in need, your response first should be compassion and help. Why? Because that's what his response is to you. If your wisdom leads you to not help, then your wisdom is not wisdom. If your wisdom says, how do I help? What's the most effective way to help? What's the way that's actually going to help them? Then that's wisdom. But if your wisdom says, I'm not going to help, because it's not help, or because I don't want to help, or because I don't think they deserve the help, then it's not wisdom. Wisdom says, how do I help? Not, I'm not going to help. That help may not be financial. Help may look different. It may say, hey, I want to see you at church. I want to see a budget. I want to see how this is going to work out, and we're going to do something different. But wisdom says, how do I help? Not, I'm not going to help. God leaves no response here, no room for, I'm not going to help. He says, if among you, one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. There are no ambiguities there. This is not my opinion on this. This is straightforward from God. His response is compassion, and he wants our response to be compassion too. I would love to leave some other room there. I would love to make this a little bit easier for you. I would love to shield myself from some of the questions I'm going to give later, but God doesn't leave any room there. God cares about the poor. God cares about those in need. He wants us to care about the same thing. And honestly, I'm glad he does, because if he didn't, I would be in trouble. Because his response to the poor financially is his same response to the poor spiritually. We learn that God cares about those in need. The second thing that we learn is that God assumes he has the right to tell you what to do with your money. He has no compunction about telling you what to do with your money. He sees no limitations on his authority when it comes to telling you what to do with what's yours. Isn't that funny? Like, he pulls no punches. There's no hesitation from him about this. There's no, I know it's yours, but I would really like you to. He just jumps right in and says, hey, this is what's yours. And why do you think he feels that way? Maybe it's because everything we have came from him. Everything we have came from him. Cooper, I don't want to talk about Cooper a lot. I guess he's not in here, so it'll work out. Cooper got this job, and one of the things that we did when we first got his job is we decided how he was going to use his money. We had this conversation about how he was going to use his money. And we decided he was going to give 10% to the church, and he was going to invest 20% of it, and he could do whatever he wanted to with the other 70%. Now, if that was me deciding what you were going to do with your money, that was going to be pretty presumptuous, right? You wouldn't like that very much. If you and I, like, you got a job and you and I sat down and I decided what you were going to do with your money, you wouldn't like that very much. But Cooper responded pretty well to it. Like, he just assumed that was going to be the way it worked out, even though he was the one working for the money, even though he was the one going and earning the money. Why do you think he responded so well to us, Brittany and I, deciding what he was going to do with his money? Maybe it's because he recognizes that everything he has comes from us. He lives in our house rent-free. He eats our food. We pay for everything from him. We have authority over him, and he recognizes that authority. So the assumption is that we're in charge of him and we're going to make that decision. Now, 3 or 4 years down the road, he would not respond that well to this, right? He's 20. That's 5 years down the road. I can do math better than that. But he's 20, he's 25, he's 30. I go to sit down with him and look at his budget and tell him what to do. That conversation is going to go differently. But for right now, he lives in our house. He eats our food. He's under our authority. And he recognizes, Mom and Dad decide what happens with my life. And if they decide this is what's going to happen with my money, this is what's going to happen with my money. And I didn't feel any hesitation at all about telling him what to do with his money. None. There wasn't a moment. Somebody said something to me about it later on, like, man, you don't have any hesitation about telling him what to do with his money. Like, no, not a moment. It didn't bother me for a second to tell him what to do with his money. Because I care about him, and I know that he needs me to make some decisions for him. It wasn't for my good. None of that benefited me. It all benefited him. So why wouldn't I make decisions for him while he's under my authority? But we look at God, and God starts to tell us what to do with our money, and we're like, hang on now. And it's weird. I preach about parenting. And I'll lay out scriptures about parenting. And nobody gets mad. None. Nobody. I'll preach about marriage. And I'll right? I'm like, husbands, do better. Wives, do better. People down here crying at the altar. And nobody gets mad. I'll preach about politics. Did it last week. I'm hoping everybody that's gone is sick and not just mad about last week's sermon. Never prayed for people to be sick before. And I'll have people 20 years older than me, 30 years older than me, praying, apologizing, repenting, building bridges. But I start talking about money and I'm going to do this. I just say that I'm going to talk about money. You ask people, why'd you leave that church? Well, that pastor, he's just talking about money all the time. Why is it that we will give God authority over parenting, marriage, politics? We'll give God authority over how we operate at work. We'll give God authority over how we live our lives. But God tells us how to use our money, and we're like, God has no hesitation to tell you how to use your money. None. But they'll tell us in seminary not to talk about money too often. I know how often a year I talk about money. I talk about money twice a year. Jesus preached about money. I think it was 60-something% of his teaching was about money. And I do it twice a year because I know how people respond to it. Why is it that God assumes he has the same authority over your parenting, your marriage, your work life, your politics, that he has the same authority over your money that he has over everything else? But we assume the opposite. What we see in this passage is that God says, I have the same authority to tell you what you do with your money as I do over everything else. Because it all came from me anyway. I work hard for my money. And what did you use to work hard for that money? The body he gave you? In the opportunities he gave you? In the country that he placed you in? We learn that God cares about the poor. He assumes he has the authority to tell you what to do with your money. And he expects you to do what he says for you to do with the money. He just expects you to do with your money what he cares about you doing with your money. And it's not a spend every dime you have on somebody else kind of situation. It's a when you see somebody in need, help them. That's the expectation. Verse 10, that's not correct. We switched to chapter 10. Let me open my computer back up. That's not correct either. Cool. This is why we keep a hard copy. I won't be able to read it because of my bad eyesight. We got a Bible right here. We're in Deuteronomy chapter 15. If you've got an old school Bible or your phone. Deuteronomy chapter 15, we'd read verse 7. If any one of you among you, verses come, open your need. All right, verse 9. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry out to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. There's this rule that every 7 years all debts were forgiven. This is not 7 years from the time you make the agreement, but every 7 years. So what happens is when you set up the terms of the loan or you take in a servant or whatever it is that you do, the repayment of the loan is based on how long until that 7th year. So if you've got 7 years left, you have lower payments. If you've got 1 year left, you've got higher payments. But if you just loan money to a poor person and they're going to pay it back when they can pay it back and you've only got 2 years left or 1 year left or 6 months left, you're not getting your money back. because all of that money is going to be gone. And what has he said? What does he say? He says, if I can find it again in verse 9, take care, be careful, lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart and you say the 7th year, the year of Elise is near. He said, be careful because you're not going to want to do this. Because you're going to look around and you're going to say, I'm not going to get my money back. You're going to disobey me because you're going to care more about the money than you do about obeying me. You're going to care more about the money than you do about the person in need. Be careful. Watch out. Because you're going to be driving down the road and I'm going to tell you to do something and you're going to swerve. And if there's not a shoulder there, you're going to hit the ditch. Be careful. Your eye will look grudgingly on your poor brother and you'll give him nothing. And here's what's important. When he cries out to the Lord against you, you will be guilty of sin. That you not loaning to your brother will be a sin. Verse 10, you shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and all that you undertake. But if instead you decide, you know what, I'm going to honor God. I don't care how much time is left of the 7th year. I don't care that there's 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. I don't care that this guy is bad with money. The only reason he's poor in the first place is because he makes bad choices with money. If he didn't make bad choices with money, I wouldn't hesitate to give to him. If he didn't make bad choices with money, he probably wouldn't be in this position in the first place. I don't care that he's bad with money. Instead, I'm going to give to him anyway. I'm going to give to him freely. I'm not going to be grudging about this. If you do that, then the Lord will bless you in all your work and that you undertake. What does this mean? That what God wants them to do is to shift their attitude that from seeing themselves as being repaid by the person and instead count their repayment as coming from God. This is an investment strategy. He says, here's what I want you to think about this as. I'm the one that gave you everything that you had. And I want you to make poor investment decisions. I want you to help the people around you that are in need with what I gave you. Not because they're going to pay you back, not because they make good choices, but because I told you to and because I care about it and because you want to honor me. And if you'll do that, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make the repayment. And I want you to do this not because you trust them to make good financial decisions, but because you trust me to pay you back. Does that mean that God's going to put every dime back in that you loan out to them? No, it doesn't. It might. He might do that. He has the ability to do that. But it means that he's going to take care of you. That God's not going to punish you for obeying him. It means that he will bless you. And whatever that looks like, you shall give to him freely. I'm going to repeat a lot of these because I don't know where I'm at in this Bible. You shall give to him freely, and your heart shall not be grudging when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and all that you undertake. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. This is a problem that you're always going to have, but it's an opportunity you're always going to have. You can decide, I'm not going to help the people around me. I'm going to be grudging with my money. I'm going to care more about the money. Or you can decide, I'm going to load up for as many blessings for God as I'm going to get. There's always going to be an opportunity to receive this blessing. It's up to you. Therefore, I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy and to the poor in your land. We're done, Addison. Don't work too much on it. You will always, always, always have this opportunity. God cares about the poor. God sees your money as his money because he's the one that gave it to you, and God sees himself as having authority over your money. You're going to rebel against this because you worked hard for that money. The reason that you have it is because you made good decisions with your money. They didn't make good decisions with their money. At least you're going to think they didn't make good decisions with their money. You don't know what's going on with them. And you're going to hesitate to do this. But God says, be careful. Be careful. Because if you disobey him on this, the center line, the ditch, whichever way you want to look on this, the center line of the ditch is disobedience to him on this. But there are some things that you can do to build a shoulder that will allow you to obey him, that'll give you a moment to hesitate. They'll give you a moment to hesitate. without completely disobeying him and give you a chance to get back on the road. Skip ahead. There, Levi, skip ahead to the things, my notes that I've got written down there. Skip ahead, there you go. The first thing you can do that he's laid out for here is recognize God's authority with your money, over your money. You can recognize God's authority over your money. If you will start by recognizing God's authority over your money, that'll give you some shoulder. Because even if you don't want to give that money away to somebody, if you've already got it built into your head that that money is yours, you're going to start with, I don't want to do that, but I'll obey God. And you might swerve a little bit, but you're going to stay on the road. You'll be on the shoulder, but you'll be on the road. Recognize God's authority over your money. How do you do that? Start obeying Him with your money on the things that aren't about helping other people. I want you to start saving some money to give away. Set aside some money. I don't care how much it is. Set aside $10 a month. Some of you got more than that. Set aside $100 a month. In a savings account, it's really easy to open a new bank account. You can make it one of those really cool high interest ones, right? Set aside some money every month and give it to God. Say, I'm going to put this money in this account, and you, if it's just you in the house, then you pray about it. If you're married, pray about it together. If you've got a family and the kids are old enough to understand this, pray about it as a family and say, God, this money is yours. We want you to tell us who to give this money to and help us be ready to release it. Prepare yourself to recognize God's authority over that. Set that money on the side so it's still yours, but start praying about giving it away. And ask God to raise somebody else up in need to give that money to prepare your heart, prepare your family to do that. And if it's possible, tell somebody else about it so that you can't back out on it. Recognize God's authority over your money. Break that hold on it by setting it aside now, designating it for whoever God has, praying about it as a family. Recognize God's authority over that. This is something we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, so I don't want to beat on this too much. But start giving money to the church that God's given to you already if you haven't done that. If God has given you this church, I don't know if we have any, I'm looking around, I'm not good at seeing you. Honestly, I'm not staring at you. I can't really even see you when I'm up here. My brain fogs up. If this is your church, then God has provided you with this church and made you a part of this church. Then it is your responsibility to contribute towards the needs of this church. And if you're not doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing us a disservice. So you need to have that conversation as a family. What is God calling us to do when it comes to this church? And that's not just because we've got bills to pay and we've got things we need to do. It's because if you're refusing to obey God in that, you have a problem between you and God that you need to break. It's just money. But you're disobeying God when it comes to that money, you have a sin problem. You have a heart problem. You don't have a budget problem. And you need to deal with that. Recognize God's authority over your money. Second, develop some compassion. If you're like, those people have made bad choices, I made good choices, I can't help them, this is a thing within me, I'm okay obeying God, but I can't help those people. If somebody makes good choices come along, I'll help them. You have a compassion problem. You need to get close to some poor people. Go volunteer at the Salvation Army. Go find the pregnancy center. Go find a pregnancy center, deal with some single moms that are coming in, and volunteer with some people that have nothing. Get to know them, hear their stories, develop some compassion for them. Panhandler at your stoplight that you go through every morning. I know you don't want to do this. Give them $1, give them a coat, give them something, and ask their name. You only have to do it one time. Ask their name and start praying for them every day by name. Do not pray for the poor. Pray for them. Pray for Steve every day. God, keep him warm today. God, help him with whatever's going on. God, help me to share the gospel with him. God, give him food today. You can pray weird, obnoxious prayers. God, help him make better choices. God, you do whatever you need to do, but start praying for him every day and ask God to give you compassion for him. Because if the problem is not obeying God, but if the problem is compassion, then ask God to develop compassion and find a person in need that you can direct that compassion towards. Because as long as they're a faceless person, you can restrict compassion. But when you get in there and you get their face and you hear their story and you can get something attached to them, you'll develop that compassion. Third, look for blessings. God said, if you will do this, I will bless you. Look for the blessings of God. Look for how God's already blessed you. Obey him and look for the blessings that he gives you through that obedience. God is not stingy. Look for the blessings he's already given you. Look for the ways that he keeps this promise. As a family, decide we're going to do this. Let's do this for a month. We've never done this before. This is new to us. Let's do this for a month, and let's look for how God keeps this promise. Look for those blessings, and then thank him for those blessings, because he will keep his promise. Fourth thing, this is not in the passage, but this is the biggest problem that we have. Most of us will obey God when it comes to money. We may not like it, but we will. Most of us will be compassionate, even if it's just because everybody else is watching. Even if we don't want to, we'll be compassionate. But the thing that we have a problem with is that we don't have any control over our money. Our money has control over us. We basically have two groups of people in this room, and that's people with enough money and people without enough money. The people that make a lot of money and people that don't make a lot of money. The people that make a lot of money, the problem with making a lot of money is there's a lot of ways to spend it because you make a lot of money. So you know what? We make a lot of money. Let's buy the car. Let's buy the other car. Let's buy the house. Let's get the subscriptions. Let's go on the vacation. Let's buy the presents. And before you know it, you have a lot of money and you spend it all. All of it. The credit card, the mortgage, the house payments, the kids' sports, it's all gone. And it's not that you don't make money. It's that you make money and you spend every dime of it on yourself. And you would obey God, but you have turned over control of your money to your money. And you disobey God, not because you want to, but because you can't obey God, because you'll go bankrupt if you miss a payment. You don't sleep, you fight, your marriage is terrible, your kids are stressed out, even they don't even know why, because you've obligated every penny of that ridiculous income that you make to go to some kind of debt service. And you never thought that you'd be in this position to make this kind of money, and yet you don't have a dime to share with anybody else. You've got to get control of your money. Because when you stand before God and he says, why didn't you obey me? I didn't have enough money is not going to work. When he pulls out your credit card statement, when he pulls out your bank statement and you go through the $750 car payment and the $900 car payment and the $2,500 mortgage payment, and he says you couldn't have done with a little less, do you think that excuse is going to work? I'm not mad at you for having a nice car, and I'm not mad at you for having a nice house. How about you pick one of those things to have instead of trying to have everything if it means that you have to disobey God? Your problem is not having money. Your problem is that you have no control. And your lack of control has left no shoulder in your life. And when he asks you to obey, you're going into the ditch. Not because you want to, but because you cannot obey with no money. And then there's the other group. The people that are not making the high income. The people that say, this doesn't apply to me because I don't have any money. The people that say, we're struggling to get by. And maybe you actually don't have any money. Maybe you have nothing. Maybe. But I just want you to think through some things. How many times did you eat out this week? How many times did you hit Starbucks this week? 7 Brew? Pop up? How many subscriptions do you have? I'm talking Netflix, Apple TV, Disney Plus. How much are you spending on your phone payment? And I get that you're not making the double income 6-figure plus for both. I get that. I get that it's harder for you. I get that you can't be passing out hundreds of dollars to help people. But when you stand before God and he says, why didn't you obey me? And he says, and you say, well, you didn't give me enough. And he pulls out your credit card, it's not going to go any better for you. Because you could have eaten out one time that week and crock-potted for the rest of the week and helped somebody out who was in the same position that you were in. Your issue is not your income when it comes to obedience to God. Your issue is a lack of control. Paul talked about this for both categories. He said that there's these people and their God is their belly. And what that means is they're slave to their cravings. They just do whatever their body says to do right now. Whatever it is right now, and for a lot of them he was talking about sexual cravings, but it can be the fact that you just want to eat out today, that you just want that coffee, you just want that soda, you just want whatever it is, and you just need, I'm stressed, so I need that treat. I'm tired, so I need that treat. We make enough, so I can need that treat. And that's fine. It's your money to do whatever you want with until you have to disobey God. So treat yourself. As long as you can still be generous to God. But if you have to disobey God and you're still treating yourself, you're in the ditch. God gave them 4 things. He gave them 3 things. I gave you 1. That will allow you to build shoulders so that when he tells you to do something that you don't want to do, that's going to be difficult to do, you can swerve and not be in the ditch. Recognize his authority, develop some compassion, exert control over your money. And if you will do these things now, then whenever the hard curve comes, you'll be ready. When he says, obey me in this thing, you'll be ready. I just want you to look at me right now and see a giant yellow sign that says 90-degree curve ahead. Because he's going to ask you to do this. He's going to confront you if this is a problem for you. And if you say, I don't know how to get control, I don't know how to do this, I've got good news for you. Starting this week, we've got Financial Peace University coming up, and it's a way for you to get a hold of your money. And if you say, I can't afford that, I know there's a fee, I can't afford that, I'll hook you up with a scholarship. I'll get you to somebody that'll pay for it for you. But don't let this continue where you're disobeying God and choosing to build some shoulder into your life. Because there are curves coming. Would you stand with me? Our Heavenly Father, we come before you right now, and I'm so grateful for the chance to come together and to worship, Lord. I'm grateful for the compassion you show us, that you don't look at us the way that we have a tendency to look at other people, and you don't restrict compassion and mercy and grace because of our mess-ups, because we keep making the same bad decisions, but you extend grace upon grace. And I ask that when it comes to the people around us, we would extend that same grace over and over. I ask that we would see the areas of our lives that we need to repent. Whether it's unwillingness to allow you authority over our money, whether it's a lack of compassion for the people in need, or whether it's the fact that we are willing to obey or show compassion, but we have allowed our credit card, or our spending, or our high income, or our sadness about whatever is going on in our life to lead us into a position that we just cannot obey you, Lord. I ask that we would stop using that as an excuse and we would take control. I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.